It's a strange day in the world of Magic the Gathering. Wizards of the Coast has made the confusing choice to not include any commander decks with the upcoming Spider-Man Universe Beyond set. On top of that, we have multiple leaks from Tarkir Dragonstorm to discuss, and some fun other little news tidbits too.
Magic. I am a wizard! History. I'm an old wizard! The magic historian. My bones hurt.
Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles, my friends. I hope the day finds you well because we have gathered for a thick and juicy installment of Mega Magic News. Now, I messed my back up recently, which has made it so I couldn't be producing these videos for a while, and a bunch of news has built up. That's what happens when you're an old wizard and your bones hurt. But I'm mostly better, and I'm back to cover everything that we have missed. Before we get into the news, I'm just going to stop during the upkeep phase here to cover two things. One, when it comes to the Black Lotus Beta Silver coin that I talked about in my last video, it is still available, but people have been saying to me, I'm getting errors trying to order it. The reason for that is it's only available in the US. I wasn't aware of that previously, so my apologies for not making that clear if that led to any frustration for you. And speaking of frustration, item 2 we're resolving in the upkeep is people have been telling me once again that YouTube has been unsubscribing them from my channel against their will. So this is just a reminder that if you want to be subscribed, double check that you are. Now, let us dive in to the biggest and most confusing thing we're going to talk about today. There's some confusion surrounding another item that we'll discuss later on, but this is the meat of the confusion. Wizards of the Coast has said, yo, we're not making commander decks for the Spider-Man set, which is honestly baffling. But first, let's actually take a look at a direct quote from the earnings call to see what they've said. So, it says, and then Spider-Man, we feel that will do well. Now, I think the important thing to note on Spider-Man is that it's a little bit of a different complexion of a set in terms of what's incorporated into it. Final Fantasy and Lord of the Rings had commander decks, which usually constitute a fairly big hunk of a set's total volume. Spider-Man will be standard-only cards. There won't be any kind of pre-con decks, so that will make it a bit smaller. I think it's interesting to note that they specifically call out the fact that commander decks constitute a fairly big hunk of a set's total volume, and that they're not going to have any of these precons, which means not just commander decks, but any other kind of pre-constructed decks, and that just makes the set a bit smaller. So this is some interesting language where they're kind of hedging and going, well, commander decks are a big thing, but also they're really tiny, and not having them is no big deal. So ultimately, this is a very strange occurrence in the current era of Magic. It has been strongly signaled for a number of years now that commander is the main focus of Magic the Gathering. That's undeniable when things like Modern Horizons 3 introduce random cards that were meant to just be throwaway includes for Commander that literally break every format that they're slapped in. Like Nadu, for example, just said, hey, I was a toss-away card for Commander. Oops, look at me going breaking formats again. So it's very strange for Wizards of the Coast to come out and say they're not making commander decks at all for a set, right? We've already been told we're pulling back to a degree on commander decks, so we saw with Aether Drift, there were 2 commander decks. Now, all of a sudden with Tarkir, we're getting 5 commander decks to go with the actual different clans. So there is a bit of a mixed signal situation going on. Now, when it comes down to how to view this, there's a couple of different perspectives that you can take, right? You can look at it and go, okay, are they not making commander decks because they've decided that they're leaning too hard into commander? My guess is that's not the reason, right? So it really boils down to one of 2 major possibilities. One possibility is Wizards of the Coast has finally reached critical mass, and we've all wondered when it was going to happen. They keep announcing more and more products and keep pushing things out into the pipeline. When are they going to reach the point where they literally can't keep production rolling at the level that's necessary to make this all work, right? So you have that scenario where it literally could be, okay, sacrifices have to be made. We're not going to be able to make commander decks for this product, and we're just going to choose to go that route. But the point against that argument is the fact that this is Spider-Man. This is a big universe beyond set. And if you're going to say no commander decks for any set, why would you choose something that you expect to be a massive banger of a set? Why wouldn't they go ahead and reduce the Tarkir commander decks, by example, down to 2? And then if they were, like, if they're going to make 5 for Tarkir, they switch it to 2. That slots for 3 more commander decks, right? So ultimately, there was a ton of people who were theorizing on the different commander decks that they would make for Spider-Man, and they have been blindsided by this. So that's one option where they basically can't produce any more stuff. There is the more cynical option where you look at it and go, maybe Wizards of the Coast has decided that they don't want people to just be able to buy commander decks. So if you're a Spider-Man fan, they don't want you to just be able to buy a commander deck for a set price, have your commander deck. Maybe they're banking on the opposite, where commander is so strong that people will get into it and they'll basically start collecting up all these Spider-Man cards to try and build a Spider-Man commander deck out of the set. So this could be essentially an incredibly greedy experience where they're trying to experiment and see, hey, maybe we can get people to pay way more for the Spider-Man stuff than if we had commander decks. Now, if you look at Final Fantasy, for example, the commander decks, there's craziness going on with that. They're all sold out for now, but bear in mind, there's going to be a ton more of that product coming. So people are gnashing their teeth, freaking out about getting those commander decks, and Wizards has none to go with Spider-Man. Actually, I suppose on a side note with the Final Fantasy thing, don't buy Jumbo Cactuar right now on pre-order, you maniacs. The price is stratospheric. We're talking over $50 for what's going to be a regular rare from the Final Fantasy set that at most will be a $4 or $5 card probably, because it's just a meme card. Once people start playing with the Cactuar, they're going to realize it's not as broken as you think it is, guys. So this is just a heads up to hold back a bit. Show a little bit of restraint for the health of your own wallet. Wait for the Final Fantasy stuff to show up. Remember, it's going to be standard legal for years, okay? So this stuff will be around. You will have an opportunity to get it. Don't burn all your money in fiending. So anyways, you see this massive burst of activity around Final Fantasy and you go, so no commander decks at all for Spider-Man. Now, I don't think that it's a reached max capacity kind of scenario, right? I think that they probably are literally just going, hey, let's ease it back a bit. There's obviously commander decks for other products coming down the pike later on this year, like Edge of Eternities, for example, which we have a little bit more news about, but they have 2 commander decks that have like 12 unique cards. So that might be why they're choosing not to do Spider-Man. Not because, hey, we don't have the capacity for commander decks, but we can make them chase the singles. And on top of that, when you look at things like the Spider-Man commander decks and Final Fantasy and whatever, they have to do all new artwork for pretty much every card that exists because they have to fit into that universe, which means each Spider-Man deck would require, even right down to the basic lands, specialized every single card, which Wizards has to pay for the artwork. So it might just be them going, listen, let's cheap out in the middle here. We're sandwiching it between Final Fantasy and Avatar, which are universe beyonds we expect to do better. We'll give them, now, I can't say for sure that Avatar will have commander decks, but I strongly suspect that the Avatar set will have commander decks. We know Edge of Eternities, which comes out right before it, will. Tarkir does. So I think this is an experiment to see if they can milk people for more money, and if they nestle it right in the middle, then they're not going to end up upsetting their shareholders by going, hey guys, so Universe Beyond didn't do as well as projected. They have one at the beginning of the year, roughly. Final Fantasy, well, it's June. What am I saying? They just showed it to us so early that my brain is thinking, hey, but literally, it's in June. And actually, when it comes to the Final Fantasy stuff, there's some crystal dice and events and everything going on with that as well. So, you know what? Let's cover that as one of the news tidbits. Like I said, messed up my bag. I got a lot to catch up on. So, if you're hyped about Final Fantasy, they're going to be doing a Chocobo racing event, and that's going to happen from June 13th to July 24th, it's going to involve a big poster a la the old Dragon Maze poster. If you didn't know the Dragon Maze thing that they did for the pre-release, it was awesome. They had this massive poster up on the wall. That was back when I used to run pre-releases. So I was the one in charge of moving all the stickers, and people had different guilds that they represented, and then they were all rushing through the maze to try and win, right? So it was a very, very cool concept, and this is somewhat akin to that, but you won't be working in teams. You'll basically be working as individuals. You will get your own little chocobo claw print sticker with your name on it to keep track of your progress. You get points for playing in the event. So it goes like this. You get 3 points for every draft or sealed event that you play in, and you get 1 point for each match that you win in those events. Now, in terms of what you get for those points, they have 10 points gets you foil chocobo artwork, and 20 points gets you a special Pinfinity augmented reality pin, which I strongly assume is going to be Final Fantasy themed, but you never 100% know what Wizards is going to do in that regard. Now, on top of that, if you basically attend the pre-release with your Wizards account, then they'll keep track of the things for you that way. And you get a crystal D10 for doing that. So they'll have a special crystal themed 10-sided die that you get for going to a pre-release using your Wizards account. And also with the pre-release kits, there is a 1 in 10 chance that you'll get a special crystal D20. So they're really pulling out all the stops with Final Fantasy, and I do like seeing events like that. It'll be curious to see how many sealed events and draft events they can actually get people into with the price point that this product's going to be at, right? Because if you basically take a look from Wilds of Eldraine until Final Fantasy, that represents, depending on where you are in the world, an 80 to 90% increase in the cost of a standard set. And from the information I've seen about Lorwyn that's coming out in 2026, they're looking at making this the new pricing for everything. So Edge of Eternities might even be up at the Final Fantasy price, because they've got to keep moving the prices upwards. Remember, we talked about their earnings in the last video, and Magic the Gathering is down. It's not down a lot, but it's down when it's supposed to be skyrocketing. So Wizards is going to be pulling all kinds of different moves to make that a reality. Now, let's take a look at some leaked cards from Tarkir. We're going to start out with the Dragon Betor, Ancestor's Voice. So, 1 green, 1 black, and 1 white, and 2 mana get you a 3/5 flying legendary spirit dragon with lifelink. At the beginning of your end step, put a number of +1/+1 counters on up to 1 other target creature you control equal to the amount of life you gained this turn. And return up to 1 target creature with mana value less than or equal to the amount of life you lost this turn from your graveyard to the battlefield. So it's a very weird kind of mix that actually feels like it would be on one of the bats that we saw from the Lost Caverns of Ixalan, right? Or actually Bloomborough as well. So I don't even know really how green fits into this. I suppose that's the +1/+1 counters tied into life, but really this feels like very much a white-black creature. The first part of the ability you're going to have no problems with, because you literally have lifelink built into him. So if you swing with him, hit for 3, you're going to get to slap 3 +1/+1s on another guy, grow him up real big, and then the second half is going to encourage you, obviously, to have different ways to pay life to do things. And then as a result, you're literally going to get to reanimate creatures from your graveyard as well. So overall, a pretty interesting package to play around with. After that, we've got Nerev the Crackling Vanguard. 1 black, 1 white, 1 red, and 2. 4/4 flying death touch. When he enters, create 2 1/1 red goblin creature tokens. Whenever he attacks, exile a number of cards from the top of your library equal to the number of differently named tokens you control. And then during any turn you attacked with the commander, you can play these cards. So this is going to count treasure tokens. This is going to count food tokens, junk tokens. All of those tokens will count towards this. They just have to have a different name. So this guy can get you a serious amount of card advantage on top of just being a 4/4 flying death toucher, right? Generates a couple dudes when he comes into play. Wizards really does slap a lot of value onto these cards. Our next spoiler is Elsha Threefold Master. So 1 white, 1 red, and 1 blue gets you a 1/1 trampler with prowess. And whenever Elsha deals combat damage to a player, you create that many 1/1 white monk creature tokens with prowess. So if you cast a bunch of spells to begin with, then she's going to be beefed up. Swing in with her, make a bunch of little donks. This is pretty sweet. I mean, ultimately, the power and toughness is pretty weak to start with, but it's easy to boost. And this is cheap, so it's recastable from your command zone fairly easily. Ultimately, it's not the craziest card, but I think that Wizards really focused on the power being front-loaded into the Spirit Dragons for this set in an attempt to make everybody forget that the Dragon Lords have been swept under the rug, and a bunch of Tarkir fans are going, wait a minute, bro, where are my Dragon Lords? This ain't all right. But ultimately, you know, she's standing there in her pose with her hand out going, yo, give me a hot pocket, bro. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is the Pride event that's going on in June. Wizards of the Coast has stepped it up compared to last year. Last year, they just gave you a foily picture for coming out to the event, and a lot of people went, and the event was limited to North America, so it didn't really do well. But this time around, Wizards of the Coast has created a special promo for the event, which I'll put up on the screen for you right now. So we've got a chromatic lantern, and this features Nico. Normally, when they had promos for these events, they would actually feature partners together. Like, oh, here's my significant other. But Nico doesn't have one, so he's basically living the Ron Burgundy life, and he loves Lamp. Right? Do you remember that? I love Lamp. That kind of concept. So this is a somewhat strange feeling card, right? Chromatic Lantern being represented as this little, hey, this is going to fly away in the air style lantern, doesn't really feel like it taps for mana. It's strange because it only features one person on it, and it has no flavor text when clearly there's room for flavor text. So it is a little bit odd, but it's nice to see Wizards giving out a promo that's actually worthwhile in this regard, right? And on top of that, this event is actually going to be held in over 30 different countries. So that's a big step forwards compared to last year. After that, we've got a little bit of Edge of Eternities information. Actually, no, sorry, there's one more thing to cover about that event. That event has a special rule that says that you can use two different commanders together. Everybody has partner for this event. And this means it's going to be an absolute nightmare for me specifically, because I know for a fact that I'm going to get hassled into playing a commander deck with two loots as both of my commanders. This whole loot thing has been an ongoing torture for me. If you haven't seen what I'm talking about over on my live stream archive, there is a whole bunch of nonsense involving loot and making my life a nightmare. In fact, when I think about being forced to use two loots as partners, this is what I look like. Now, let's move on to talking about Edge of Eternity. So it turns out Edge of Eternities is going to be bringing back Galaxy foils, and on top of that, they're going to have a 45 card bonus sheet, which is something that Wizards of the Coast has dialed back, right? Most sets now just have the special guests showing up very, very infrequently, and that's essentially the new version of the list, right? Where Wizards of the Coast goes, you can get these special cards, but there's only a handful. But Edge of Eternities will have a full-on side set, and it will basically most likely be different lands from Magic the Gathering represented as planets. Because if you took a look at Wizard Stream, where they went over all the information they released about Tarkir, Edge of Eternities, then you would see there are a ton of different planet arts. And actually, I covered that in a live stream over on my live stream channel too, where we went through all the different artwork and talked about it. But there are a ton of planetary artworks. And so that's a way to basically satisfy the desire of people who are really into the space concept and get a reprint bonus sheet, because ultimately they probably don't have much faith in Edge of Eternities. And if you look at things like Thunder Junction, Aether Drift, for example, Markov Manor, those sets all did poorly and were outside the normal realm of Magic the Gathering. So having a bonus sheet is Wizards' way of trying to make sure to goose the numbers there at the end of the year. So it looks like, yep, we did it, my friends. We made it through all of the news. So if you made it through this massive news extravaganza, let me know in the comments below that you survived the overwhelming tsunami of magic news. And also, you can let me know your thoughts on what's going down. So I'm going to get on up out of here. Big shout out to my patrons for supporting my channel. You guys rule. I will see you all in the next video, and I'll be doing a live stream over on my other channel tonight if you want to come by and say hi.